Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Monday. It is March the 31st, and I really appreciate you being here. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. I had kind of an interesting weekend. I got to move the last stick of furniture. Literally, there was one more thing. It was the original podcast desk that we launched, sort of like, I don't know, the 2.0 version of the Kyle Seraphin Show from. And it is huge. It's 8 feet wide, and it probably weighs about 200 pounds. And I broke it into the two pieces. And I took it, threw that in the back of the truck, and that was it. So we are done with the old address, which is good because we got doxxed this weekend, which is also not awesome. But I grew up in a different era. Like many of you, I grew up in an era when people used to actually have all their information, their addresses, their phone number, their names, put into a book. It was published by a reputable source, and then they would drop it on everyone's doorstep. They distributed it and doxed everybody for all time in all of my experience until I grew up in the internet age and got out of the house, and suddenly people stopped using phone books. You guys remember phone books? Was that doxing for someone to know where you live? I don't actually care if you know where I live. It doesn't actually matter that much to me. I live in Texas, which I've had to say it multiple times. And just don't come over here and do anything stupid. I've got great neighbors. I moved into a new place. And as I always used to tell you guys, how do you fix the problem? You go out there and you meet your neighbors, right? Go out there and make a community of where you live. And if you haven't done that, get on it, folks. I've only been in this house for a couple of days, and I've met at least 75, maybe 80% of the people that are on the street. That's just what you do. This is how you make America heal. You go and you meet people and you let them know who you are. And they realize you're a person, even if they don't like you or agree with you. They know that you got kids, and you know that you're not out there like trying to subvert their existence. Jeez Louise. Anyway, so we had a little interaction with somebody online that was kind of dumb. And yeah, as is wont to be the case for the internet. I also, for the first time in probably since March of 2022, I got to a gun range where I actually got to just shoot and do some training. And so if you guys haven't done anything like that in a while, man, just do it. Go out there. I know we have a lot of things in our lives that get in the way. All right, so we got a lot to cover today for the show. There's a Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. That's happening. There are still Democrats upset about Signalgate. I've only got like one or two things here. It's basically a contrast in accountability. That's the words that they're using. Listen, we're all for accountability over here, but we just are not going to take any lectures from Democrats at this point. First Amendment crackdowns, what's going on with schools, getting rid of people who came here under false pretense to be agitators and political activists. That's kind of interesting. Elon Musk handing out big money. There was a court decision that tried to stop him from handing out $1 million a piece for folks that got drawn. A little bit about Doge, some of the behind the scenes of what's happening over there that I think is really interesting. And then, of course, the leftist media machine is still ongoing. So remember, it's not the fact that people are trying to engage in straight up domestic terrorism. That's when you use acts of violence that are against state law, and then you go out there and use it to try to influence government or the populace. It's really people that might run over somebody standing in the middle of the freaking roadway. So Tesla protest goes awry in Idaho. We'll hit that. The Democrats are getting upset with their options for president, for leadership, and so on. You know, people like Barack Obama and Joe Biden may have fumbled the ball. Relationship expert, I found a little thing that I found troubling about women staying single for longer. That doesn't seem like a good idea. And then Marine Le Pen has been sentenced to prison time. We're going to talk about Europe and why it matters. France, America, the UK, Romania. We all have all these places are interconnected by culture and by history and so on. And we're seeing the same media machine that goes out there and tries to protect the same things. Yeah. I think it matters. And so we're going to get into that as well. Before we get too deep into the weeds, we're going to say thanks to the folks over at Blackout Coffee. It's blackoutcoffee.com/Kyle, folks. I've probably been telling you about Blackout Coffee for a few months now. You told me about them to begin with. And if you haven't tried it yet, let me break it down. They're not just a regular coffee brand. They're a company that was built on hard work and grit and American values 6 years ago. That's not very long for people who want to launch a business out of their garage. The founders started in their own garage, and today they've got a 64,000 square foot facility that's roasting every single coffee bean in-house, packing each of the order themselves, and employing over 30 hardworking Americans in this country. No corporate nonsense, just a damn good coffee made by people who actually give a damn. I do appreciate that. There's a few things in the world that are worth spending a few dollars on, like a luxury item. And if you're going to have something every single day that changes your life or makes your life a little bit better, just something to smile about, have the cream you like, have the sugar product you like. In mine, it's actually honey. We have Texas honey that we dip in there. Have a coffee that you enjoy, okay? That's that. Blackout Coffee isn't just about making a great cup of coffee. They're also about supporting an American dream. They build a company the right way with no shortcuts and no woke nonsense and no weak beans, no weak bosses, no garbage. If you believe in hard work and real values and a coffee that's going to get you moving, it's time to make the switch. So check out, again, it's blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Promo code Kyle saves you 20% on your first order. Keep the American dream alive. Support real coffee companies and drink Blackout Coffee. Coffee you guys can really appreciate. All right, you ready to do this? Let's do it. Let's jump in. Yeah. All right, so here we go. We're going to start off with this. Actually, while I got your attention for a second, just remember, you can always join the live chat. I always see you guys here early, so I appreciate that. Rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin, the friendliest and the most accepting live chat on the internet. You can also go over to our friends over on YouTube, and it's youtube.com/Kyle Seraphin, @Kyle Seraphin on X. Easy places to stream it. The locals channel is KyleSeraphin.com. That's where we let out the Sunday special on Saturday, the Sunday sit down. If you guys want to do that, make sure you're liking, subscribing, notifying yourself wherever it is. And if you're listening after the fact and you're listening on like iTunes or something like that, check out Spotify because you can get the video there as well. And it's KyleSeraphinShow.com. If you want a simple link, if you're not really good at doing search parameters, KyleSeraphinShow.com will get you there. Let's do our first story. Here it is. Trump officials signal chat. It could have ended American lives, so saith Mark Warner, my former senator, or I guess he's the senator, but from my former location when I lived in Virginia. He said on Sunday that if the information had been leaked to the right people about the plans to strike the Houthis in Yemen, then American lives could have been lost. It's not real clear to me how that would be. We've covered down on the threat, whether they have the capabilities for anti-aircraft. They didn't have any targets named. They didn't have any ingress routes named. They didn't have any frequencies to be able to intercept. Our military is actually pretty good at doing things. And of course, the biggest piece is you were sending it to a journalist who had no ability to validate the information until after it already took place. So if he had leaked it, who the hell would he leak it to? And is he in contact with like Yemenis, Houthi, militants? It doesn't seem very likely. We're not really willing to listen to these lectures. I'm not willing to listen to it. And so it's nice to have people that are in the mainstream media that are talking about this stuff. You've got guys like Scott Jennings, who we continue to share here. Why? Because he's got the best takedowns. He's single-handedly keeping CNN's ratings up, from what I can tell. And here he is engaging with, I can't remember what her name is. I think she's the president of like Americans for Progress or some other lib group. We're not going to take your lectures. Here's a little taste of what it looks like if you stand up and say, people could die. That would work right up until the point where we lived through 2021, and we already saw this. So here's a couple little takedowns that are fun.
Believe in accountability.
I think Republicans aren't interested in lectures on accountability in the military after the Biden administration. I mean, the bar for getting rid of a Secretary of Defense is apparently pretty high. You can get 13 people killed and go AWOL and not tell the commander-in-chief, and that's not a fireable offense. He did his lectures about accountability and national security after letting 10 million people into the country who raped and murdered and committed violent acts, and no remorse or accountability.
What are you talking
no
about?
More lectures. No more lectures about national security. This was a hugely successful mission. The decision was righteous. The strike was the exact right thing to do, and it was executed flawlessly.
He was not on that signal chain. But the idea that he didn't know about it when he was first asked about it, and the extent to which he doesn't know, seems rather deliberate.
Oh my God, Donald Trump is either pretending or actually didn't know about the signal chat that had no specifics in it. This is such a big deal. Can you understand how outraged we are? We would be, except the kids have an expression right now, miss me with that shit, right? Miss me with that. It means we don't believe in the premise of your argument. You're not coming in as a good faith actor. You're not saying something that has any weight because you've already discredited yourself. Another little Scott Jennings clip. Like I said, he can go like 4 against 1, which is kind of fun to watch. Scott Jennings is not the most aggressively angry conservative guy out there in the world. He's an OG Republican, strategist and consultant and so on. And he's still handling these people because he's realized all you got to do is ask them simple questions or just point out the basic facts. And all of this leads to that media narrative machine that continues to try to spin something. I've got probably the weirdest take. I don't know if Jon Stewart was trying to own himself, but he seems to say unironically that the United States is immune from media spin and propaganda. I'll play you that in a little bit here too. But first, let's just this is a person called Lulu Garcia Navarro. It's always the hyphenated names. She's a podcaster, apparently, and a strategist, and maybe an author. I can't remember all the pieces of it, but she's on CNN trying to talk about how bad it was. Again, people would die. And he brings up the ultimate trump card, which was August of 2021. Some of us still remember that.
This isn't, cowboys and Indians and calling for scalps. This is actually what most people would think was if someone has behaved in a way that puts American lives at risk, they should be held accountable for it.
Scott, what's your response?
Laura, may I, since she addressed me, I'll answer it.
Please.
In a Democratic, you don't have to make up hypotheticals, Lulu, about if this happened in a Democratic administration. Let me take you back in time. In a Democratic administration, the Secretary of Defense oversaw a disastrous military operation in which 13 servicemen died in Afghanistan. Then, to try to make up for it, they vaporized 7 children in a drone strike. Then later, the Secretary of Defense went AWOL and didn't even tell the commander-in-chief.
This is a completely
you don't
different
have to
thing
come
that
up
you're,
with a hypothetical,
these are two
Lulu,
different things that you're discussing.
the bar
and
apparently is very high,
Scott,
very high for dismissing a Secretary of Defense.
I don't want your words
Scott,
to fall on ears that
as
cannot
much
hear
as
you.
like.
Lulu, what's your reaction?
My reaction is it's not the same thing. I can take you back in time and talk about the Iraq
You're
War.
right, because people died. People died in the last case and not in this case.
Mistakes. This was using an unsecure method of discussion by the top members of this administration to discuss top secret.
Another lady who's never held a security clearance has ideas about top secret. It's almost like this media spin is designed to just protect the people that are involved. Like I said, I got to play you this Jon Stewart clip because when I heard it, they're talking about Hungary, okay? Which has gone, quote unquote, far right, which is to say that it's basically a liberal Christian democracy at this point. And they don't just kowtow to invading foreigners that don't hold into the sort of homogenous beliefs and heritage and background of the country. Now, I'm not ever going to agree with you. I had somebody say this morning, they were like, yeah, we just need to let voters only be white males of European descent. Screw you. The white nationalist crowd, piss off. You're barking up the wrong tree with me. Why? Because I've got friends who have much darker colored skin than I do, and they've cut throats for this country. They drop bombs for this country. They've put America's enemies in the ground. And sometimes to the actual complaints of the leftists at the New York Times. My buddy actually sent me an article one time, and he's a killer. He's just an absolute stud. He also happens to have a mom who is from Mexico. So if he's listening, I won't say his name because he's still working in the community. And he said, yeah, we made the New York Times. Look at this. They're complaining that we killed a Muslim funeral procession. He goes, I guess it could have been a funeral procession if their friend that they were interning was made of bomb parts and they decided to bury him in the middle of the damn road that we drove in all the time. A disingenuous info op being covered out by the New York Times. I've got friends who have bled for this country and they are not of European stock or descent. Korean, black, Hispanic, irrelevant, totally irrelevant. If you're a stud and you care about America, you're on my team. The end of the day. So that I want to say. But there is something very ironic and amusing about a Jon Stewart. I don't know if he's joking. He's pretty good at deadpan, but he usually does the mocking face. I think he's actually being serious about this. I think he doesn't realize that our machine does in fact defend the status quo, and all of that is going towards what I look towards a future of what's happening in Great Britain. We're actually really close to it anyway, in so much as If we didn't have a Second Amendment, and if we didn't have the election that we just had in November, we could march that way and surrender to an enemy from within. And that's not to say that everybody who is a Muslim is a problem. It's just to say that obviously the people who are at the top are interested in non-American values. And that seems completely obvious to you, especially when you see the millions that were let in under the Biden administration, some of them, hundreds of thousands of them, from Middle Eastern countries that don't have to assimilate and apparently just get paid to be on the government dole. Their only purpose is to keep the leftists in power. We're going to cover that as well. That's why I guess this Supreme Court election that's going on in Wisconsin is so important right now. It's giving an opportunity to talk about it. But more importantly, you're just seeing the difference, the media spin machine, and it defends status quo. And the status quo right now is not good. This is the whole reason why people are interested in making America, quote unquote, great again. Because it means that they've slipped from greatness. I may have seen the peak of America in my lifetime, and you guys may have as well. And it's sometime between the late 70s and like the early 90s. We had all the things. We had great childhoods. We had a pretty decent economy. We had a lot of people who were being lifted out of poverty globally. It was happening. And then for some reason, we were what? We decided to apologize for our own success as a nation. In any case, contrast here. Here's Jon Stewart talking about a media machine in Hungary and can't seem to figure out that this is like a one-to-one analogy to what happens in the United States. He said if it ever happened here, it would never happen here in America. We wouldn't stand for it. We already did.
You're saying if you have a media machine that purposefully lies to its people to maintain a political fiction and get themselves power, that is the hallmark of an authoritarian system, not a democratic system.
Absolutely.
Well, if we were ever to get something like that in the United States, we would be horrified, furious. To know that there was an entire media organization designed to bend reality, to manipulate facts, to maintain power, it would, if I may, and I'm not trying to slam Hungary, it would never happen in the United States. It would never happen in the United States. It's just not, I almost can't even conjure it, imagine it. It must be very difficult to live in a country where one media organization, out of whole cloth, knowingly, explicitly, maybe even in meetings behind the scenes might say, we're lying to our audience, holy shit, and then call for news people to be fired for telling the truth. I mean, if something like that happened in the United States, it would be a dark day indeed.
Whoa. Huh?
So I appreciate you raising the alarm bells for us.
This woman cannot believe the insanity of what this man just said. Like I said, it is the most unaware, lack of self-awareness position to hold that we don't have an American media that does that. That's truly wild. That is a truly wild position to espouse. And I'll give you a little taste of it. We're hearing suddenly CNN cares about whether or not messages are secure. This is the same people that defended Hillary Clinton. They suddenly care about messages being secure from top administration officials, and they actually care about military life. People could die. What about Afghanistan? What about Abbey Gate? What about that fat piece of garbage, Lloyd Austin, who disappeared, as Jennings called out, disappeared for like a week and didn't tell anyone that he was dying of cancer and getting treated? That is a truly wild moment. And so here you go. This is what it sounds like if you were to ask that question under oath. This is C-SPAN. Pretty decent little clip of Lloyd Austin. He regrets nothing, folks.
But do you have regrets about the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
I support the president's decision.
Do you have regrets about the withdrawal or how the withdrawal occurred from Afghanistan that cost the lives of 13 of our service members?
I don't have any regrets.
You don't have any regrets. Secretary Austin, it's very telling. Secretary Austin, has there ever been any accountability for anyone within the Department of Defense for the deadly, botched, and embarrassing withdrawal from Afghanistan? Any accountability?
Hey, listen, our troops evacuated 124,000 people off of that airfield.
Has anyone been held accountable? If a Navy captain grounded a ship, what happens immediately?
Typically, that captain is removed.
That captain is removed. Has anyone been held accountable for what happened in Afghanistan?
To my knowledge, no.
You don't regret it? No one's ever been held accountable? Mr. Chairman, this is why this Republican majority must provide the accountability that this administration wants to sweep under the rug with what happened in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and it didn't happen yet. And by the way, we're seeing problems with accountability at the FBI still. If you guys caught what was going on over the weekend, I had a tweet that went a little ways. Essentially, we played a clip for you the other day of Kash Patel standing up saying, let good cops be cops. And he's standing there and he's got a couple of FBI officials behind him. And I had multiple retired FBI agents and former FBI agents and my friends in the Suspendables comment that Stanley, Medor, is standing behind him. And he's the special agent in charge of Richmond Field Office in 2023 when the radical traditionalist Catholic intel product got published. In other words, the guy who was the final buck stops with me person who had to rubber stamp everything that went out of that field office was the guy that said it was okay to prioritize Catholics. And he's standing behind Kash Patel in the middle of a meeting talking about cops being cops. Where's that? Why is that guy still there? You got a little bit more time on the beach, but we got to see some movement and we got to see some of these people get taken out. I'm not telling you that they don't know who he is. I actually have a pretty good idea they do know who he is. I'm telling you that I am keeping it publicly and front of mind awareness because there are a couple of axes that I will continue to grind. I'm not looking to go out and play in the FBI again. I don't want to be a federal agent again, ever. I just don't have any interest to it. It left me. I was standing here and the job went somewhere else. And it went into doing things that were evil and a bunch of people that were weak. They lost their way because they had no principles, and I don't care to be a part of something like that. I definitely don't want to be part of an agency that's going to stab me in the back a second time, this time with a neon sign saying this one. I don't need that. But I do need to see some people lose their jobs. I'd like to see some pensions removed. I'd like to see some people who engaged in nefarious behavior under color of law and abused the authorities that they were entrusted with because they were not good stewards of that trust. Those people should be gone. So we need to see more of the Dan Bongino podcast, Tough Talk. Where's the pipe bomber guy? I need that Dan Bongino to start popping up. And he's got a small amount of time before he can get forward and do this. You have to understand the lay of the land. I get it. That probably should have been done beforehand. It turns out he actually had access to people that he could have reached out to find out what was going on. And it doesn't have to be me or Steve or Garrett or George Hill. There are plenty of people that we could have turned him to. Neutral parties that would have given him the roadmap to what is going on there. I would have been happy to help him find that. But he's got it. He's in it. I don't wish that job on anybody. I wish him the best of luck. I really do. I pray for his success. You should too. But broadly speaking, accountability's got to happen at the FBI, then more broadly to the DOJ, then more broadly to the federal government at large. This is the entire thing that we're hearing about with Doge. It has to happen. And then we need to have accountability in this country for a bunch of people that snuck in, for a invading group of human beings that do not have our values, that do not want to be American. They want to be isolated. They want to be paid by this American government to continue to keep the people, that status quo media operation that you just heard Jon Stewart talk about. Those people want to stay in power. It's the same people that we're working over in the UK. And the UK is a great harbinger of what is to come for us if we don't get our act together. So I've got some fair amounts on that. Before we go to the Wisconsin Supreme Court and the free speech piece, I'm going to play some Bill Maher. Mixed bag. One clip that I think is a good job on him. Another one that's kind of like just mealy-mouthed. Yeah, we're going to do that. But before we do it, let's lean over to our friends over at Patriot Coolers. They are our longest sponsor. I had them out on the range the other day. This is another one. I've got so many that if I ever have one that's not clean, I can always go to it. Real simple, patriotcoolers.com. I didn't even put the collection in there. If you're looking for the collection for the engraved thing, look for one of the old shows in the show notes. But patriotcoolers.com is the main website you guys would go to. This is a wood grain cup. It's a 20 ounce. It's a really nice size. It fits really well. They're durable. They do the job. I'll leave ice in there like overnight for 2 days and come back and find that the ice is still in there and it's still iced out and I can go and have a cold drink, which is pretty funny. Sometimes I'm like, wait a minute, when did I pour this? 2 days ago? Holy moly. Luckily, it's just water. PatriotCoolers.com. The promo code KYLE saves you 10%. If you spend $50 or more, you'll get free shipping. Buy one for you, buy one for a friend. Do it when you're looking for a gift, corporate gift, friend gift, housewarming gift, take your pick. They're very easy. They're transactional. They are better than anybody else is out there, as far as I can tell, mostly because they actually care about America and they're not going to cancel you for being a conservative. And if you want to get a custom order for your business, by all means, either reach out to me at info. It's info@kyleseraphin.com. I'll put you in touch with Gary. We've had some orders come that way for people who want to do stuff for their business. If you guys want to get something custom on there and it's a conservative message, they won't cancel you like we just saw Yeti did the other day. PatriotCoolers.com, promo code KYLE. Big fan of them. Really appreciate what they're up to. Let me do this too, because this is going to play into a Bill Maher clip talking about cracking down on the First Amendment. It's interesting when CBS frames things in the way that they do. You're seeing on the screen here a headline: Donald Trump's crackdown on students with visas and green cards. It sets up a First Amendment showdown. That's not really what's going on here. This is a disingenuous media machine operation. The same thing Jon Stewart was talking about. I'll read you a little bit of this article here. Trump administration's crackdown on students who participated in pro-Palestinian activities. Yeah, I'm still of the belief that there's no such thing as Palestine, only because it is not its own autonomous country. They've raised questions about the First Amendment rights of visas and green card holders amid shocking detentions of students at Tufts and Columbia and other universities recently. Marco Rubio cited a provision. Oh my God, Marco Rubio cited a law and the policy that is longstanding and predates the Trump administration that provides the Immigration and Nationality Act authorizes the nation's top diplomat, aka Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, to revoke visas of foreign national students on the grounds that their presence or activities potentially have serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the U.S. Well, that's real simple, isn't it? Now, you can claim that it's because it's a pro-Israel administration or that there's Zionists in the White House or any other nonsense. But at the end of the day, the people who won the election get to decide whether or not people inside the United States agitating and doing political activism are a problem for what they're trying to operate. And the second thing is, if you lied on your application for your visa, the underlying visa can be pulled and therefore your green card. So again, I do agree that First Amendment issues need to be respected. We should not be removing people simply for speech. But in accordance with federal law, and when you are not a U.S. citizen here, we should also be aware that there are some limits for people who don't belong here. You don't get to just travel. I imagine if you traveled to any country in Europe and suddenly decided to have, some sort of a protest that you were organizing as a foreigner, they wouldn't smile on it. That's the case in most places you go. I used to make a joke. This was my joke, that we should take all the homeless people in America and we should export them to Mexico, since the Mexican flag seems to fly at a lot of these immigration rallies. You could fly a lot of Americans, send them all down to Mexico City, send them all down to Cancun, send them all down to whatever other big cities down there. I don't care. And then all at once on one day, let them all just throw off the cloak and say, we're Americans. We demand free subsidies. We demand public housing. We demand a right to vote. We demand medical care. We demand all the things. We want to be also acknowledged as Mexicans because we're here, even though we didn't ask to come here, even though we got parachuted in by the United States. Is that a thing? No. They'd all get rounded up and they'd all roundly be kicked back here. In any case, Bill Maher is funny in this little clip here because he's both making the argument that free speech is super important and students should be able to say whatever they want, and at the same time saying that these students at Tufts and Columbia and other universities are absolute fools. They've cried wolf and they have discredited themselves to the point where nobody cares what they think. So I feel like he's actually arguing against himself, and he does so immediately by sort of lampooning this Columbia professor, and that's why I enjoyed this one. So I'm going to play it for you real quick. It's a Columbia professor, Bill Maher, making an argument, and then he's claiming that they got arrested for tattoos. No, they got arrested for violating the federal provisions of their visa and maybe for coming here under false pretense. Turns out, in a nation of laws, if you enforce them, then some people are actually going to go to jail, or they're going to get deported, or they're going to have to leave. The end.
All right. So, John, you work at Columbia University.
I do.
Speaking of clown cars.
I should say that I have been on a blissful sabbatical for the entire year.
Lucky you.
So I only know so much, but go ahead.
All right. Well, I mean, starting last week, Trump is going to war now on elite universities. Now, I cannot be a hypocrite. I went through my book that came out last year. It'll be out in paperback very soon. I can't be a hypocrite. I wrote down some of the things that I've said over the past that were gathered in the book. Don't go to an elite college, it makes you stupid. Elite universities are the mouth of the river from which manner all radical left illiberal, yes, illiberal nonsense flows. They're four-year daycare centers for the cry bullies of the privileged to complain about privilege. College today is not the college you remember. It's a day spa and a North Korean re-education camp put together. They're asshole factories. If ignorance is a disease, Harvard yard is the Wuhan wet market. Okay, so that's where I am. I can't, but I get the inclination, but as with most things now with this new administration, the way they do it, you can't do it by taking people off the street just because they wrote an op-ed pro-Palestinian. I'm not pro-Palestinian the way they see it either, but, or, you know, these people who were just disappeared because they have...
Nobody was disappeared and nobody was taken off the street because of an op-ed. It was because they were doing things that were pretty obviously antithetical to America's foreign policy interests, as cited here. It turns out, yeah, elections have consequences. They've been telling this for a long time. And amusingly, when you're making the argument that elite universities are asshole factories, it also means that you're going to attract people who want to become assholes. And assholes, it turns out, whether you're legally allowed to do it as an American citizen, if you're not an American citizen, you're here on a visa, you might find yourself on the wrong side of the law if you violate the provisions, especially if you start telling people that you came here for one reason, to get an education, and it turns out that you spend all of your time being a political activist. It's just not a strong position. You don't get to make that claim. It doesn't work. We're going to pivot over to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin here in a second, but I just wanted to kind of hone in on this media narrative continues, and it's even funnier when they debunk themselves. And what do they have to do in order to get that accomplished, by the way? They have to go after the very people who make this country strong, the toxically masculine, right? The people who are going to rebuild when things are broken, sadly. And you have to be able to basically empower the weakest. Now, I've called that suicidal empathy before on this program, and I continue to believe that. And there's a couple of little pieces of evidence, both in the cultural sphere, in the political sphere, and then also looking abroad as sort of a harbinger of what's to come. It is a truly dangerous situation to emasculate men who are used to being able to speak forcefully. Remember, they were always they don't want to hear the protesters that have something to say that doesn't agree with the narrative and the status quo that they are trying to encourage, which just continues to march ever leftward. I will reiterate this. I said this to my neighbor the other day, and he was like, man, I've never thought about that before. Donald Trump is not a conservative. And that doesn't mean that I'm mad at him for that. But I'm just going to be real honest with you. A man who's had multiple divorces, who's lived the life that he's lived, is not conservative, at least not by any definition of it that sits on most of us. He could be a Republican. That's totally fine. But in reality, he's kind of like a Democrat who got left behind. And by the way, his administration is full of them. He's a Democrat from 1992. He's probably further to the left than Bill Clinton 1992 because he doesn't seem to care about gay marriage. That doesn't seem to bother him, right? And we're just being honest about this thing. We don't have to put a judgment on it. We'll just state that at the peak of America, there was a thing. It was the most common political and the most winning political strategy, which was a lot of tolerance, but not suicidal empathy. And if you go and look at that, Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., the big tent, weird influencers who like to show off and have, their bodies out there in the world. The lady who founded the Ho Walk or whatever the hell that was, the Slut Walk, out there on the GOP stage during the RNC. There's nothing really conservative about that. It might be the winning option, and it certainly is going to help steer this country back towards where it was, because we've gone so hard and deep into the left that literally a turn to the left from 1992 is a hard right banking turn that makes them call you literally Hitler. And that's wild. It comes from people who don't want any accountability. And it turns out that toxic masculinity is a little bit of that. And Donald Trump has always been kind of an example of that, right? Didn't you see him wearing he had bikini babes and speedy cars and lots of money and flashiness and all that kind of stuff? This is not conservative per se. It's masculine though. And it is a turn. It's Western. We can't say otherwise. So just keep that in mind as we start moving into this thing about the Supreme Court that's going to go, the Supreme Court election that's happening in Wisconsin. Another very, very critical one. The danger is that none of the problems that were in Wisconsin have been fixed. They're still using machines. So consider that as we move forward. Let's go talk about underwear. That seems like a masculine thing. Back in the day, like fit dudes wearing underwear on TV was a thing. I'm glad that we don't do that. I'm not crazy about seeing like weird fat soft bodies either, but so for whatever it is. So we're going to talk about UnderTAC. It's the world's best boxer brief. They're designed by a special forces operator in Africa's harshest terrain. One of my buddies was an SF guy in Africa. UnderTAC isn't just underwear. It's a tactical gear that's built for tough missions and worldwide rucking to crush your daily grind. By the way, I've got a little story about that I'll add to this because it's kind of fun. It's a dad victory that I had. The boxer briefs are made with premium modal fabric. It's 50% more moisture wicking than cotton, so that's good. It keeps you cool and dry, and it locks in your comfort. Hidden escape and evasion pockets discreetly store critical items like maybe a micro SD card with encrypted data, or emergency cash for when the stakes are high, or maybe a handcuff key, or just a bobby pin. Pair them with an American-made pair of merino wool socks, the Urban Ops hoodie. These things are built tough, keeping you comfy and mission ready, whether you're at the range or in the field or relaxing on your couch or teaching your daughter how to ride a bicycle. More on that in a second. Limited time only. UnderTAC's giving you a free pair with your next purchase. So do not wait. Go to UnderTAC.com, UnderTAC.com. That's UnderTAC.com and use the promo code Kyle. You buy 3, you get 1 free. That's almost your whole week of undies right there in one little fell swoop. And you'll get, 1 and 4 free? That's not nothing. Your purchase helps stop child trafficking operations, human trafficking operations with a veteran-run group that is out there fighting them. Gear up with a purpose and support American heroes and secure your junk. Complete your mission. Promo code Kyle. Again, the link is in the show description. It's UnderTAC.com. Promo code Kyle. Okay, real quick thing about a dad victory, because I was wearing my UnderTACs. I knew that I was going to get sweaty and that I was going to be running a whole bunch. I taught my 6-year-old, rather my 6-year-old learned, and I was a facilitator of the learning. She learned how to ride her bicycle. This is another kind of OG masculine thing, like the dad win. I remember my dad teaching at least one of my brothers how to ride a bike. I don't know if I remember him teaching me, but maybe I was just too young. I do remember him teaching one of my brothers. I remember some stitches, by the way. I've got a better method than my dad had. I had some better techniques. Yeah, but my 6-year-old, one day, learning how to ride a bike. And I put on the UnderTAC undies before I went out there because I knew I was going to be running crazy. It's like 95 degrees in Texas already. It's stupid. For those of you who are still getting snow up in the north, yeah, it was crazy hot. We ran around. It's probably why I look bronzed, because I am sunburned. It's just the nature of the beast. But little dad victories on things like that. Let's talk about things that are not dad victories. This is the thing that we are trying to fight against. Elon Musk rallying in support of Doge at this Wisconsin campaign event. Again, talking about the situation in the Supreme Court. He's trying to boost Brad Schmiel, but ended up talking about Doge stuff because some of the Doge stuff is what is on the ticket there. When you start thinking about it, how does this work? Supreme Courts have been the proving grounds and have been the final arbiters of a number of elections. Wisconsin is not is one of the examples of that. And so he's out there rallying on this, and then, he starts to end up talking about stuff because you go back to the well of the things you know, and one of the things he knows is that scams and fraud continue to happen. I've got a really neat clip from this rally, and I think it's worth discussing. What was the scam? The allegation that conservatives made was that 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, 20 million people have been led into this country illegally. They were being given access maybe to vote, at least in the future, and they were going to turn the tide against us forever, and that you would never see American-born Americans being able to decide the fate of this country. That doesn't even take into account birthright citizenship. I'm just saying people who came here illegally weren't supposed to be able to vote, and everybody said, well, that's what the whole goal is. That's the end goal, and then the left was saying, well, no, that never happens. And then Elon Musk went out and pulled the numbers on it. And what you're seeing on the screen behind you is the graph, and it measures in the millions, several million illegal aliens brought into this country that were given Social Security number, and it sounds like they were done so improperly. When you have a Social Security number, I guarantee you can figure out how to get a ballot. That's one of the main things you can show. So here he is talking about this on the stage at this campaign event.
This is worth just reiterating. It's not people sometimes think that under the Biden administration that he was simply asleep at the switch. He wasn't asleep. They weren't asleep at the switch. It was a massive, large-scale program to import as many illegals as possible, ultimately to change the entire voting map of the United States and disenfranchise the American people and make it a permanent, deep blue, one-party state from which there would be no escape.
Look, if I hadn't seen this myself, I'm not sure I'd have believed it. I went through it myself and mapped it, and Elon is right. This is true. The defaults in the system from Social Security to all of the benefit programs have been set to max inclusion, max pay for these people, and minimum collection. That's what's happening. We found 1.3 million of them already on Medicaid, as an example. We've gone through on every benefit program we went through, we found groups from this particular group of people, this 5.5 million people in those benefit programs. And then what was really, really disturbing us was why. We're asking ourselves why. And so we actually just took a sample and looked at voter registration records. And we found people here registered to vote in this population, yes.
And who did vote?
And we found some by sampling that actually did vote. And we have referred them to prosecution at the Homeland Security Investigation Service.
Yeah.
Already. That has already happened.
Okay, the numbers you're seeing on that screen, if you can't see the graph, if you're just listening to me, they were like 270,000, 590,000, 900,000, and then 2.6 million, I want to say, and then another 900,000. It comes out north of 5 million people. That, like in my lifetime, that was the number of estimated illegal aliens in the United States. And now it's the number that have been given Social Security cards, of which they already said 1.3 million were already added to the rolls of public health. So they're getting public benefit, having never contributed. So I'm hearing people like Jasmine Crockett go out there and talk about, oh, these people pay billions into the tax base. Yeah, what do they cost us, though? If you are out there and you are a net negative, what the hell are we doing? And this is what it all comes about. It comes down to values. This is the woman who is running against Bradley. Is it Schmiel? Or Shymil? You guys will tell me in the chat how I'm mispronouncing this guy's name. It doesn't make that much difference to me in so much as I can look at the alternative. First of all, I'm not real crazy about lady justices. I don't know why that is. It's not that I don't like women. It's that I don't want women making crazy decisions because they have suicidal empathy. And this woman's a great example. She's going in and talking about how she's going to defend her record, giving a much more lenient stance to pedophiles in Wisconsin and allowing them to live across the street from a school. Because that's the sentencing guideline. Then we're going to look over the pond and see sentencing guidelines and where this goes when you continue this nonsense. This is why it has to stop.
A man who sexually assaulted a 5-year-old child repeatedly. She had to testify at trial. The jury convicted. My opponent still refused to revoke bond, the $500 signature bond she released him on. She let him live near us across the street from an elementary school. She didn't change any of that after he was convicted. And then at sentencing time, in spite of the pleas of the victim, she ultimately gave that offender a sentence that resulted in him being in prison for less than 2 years after that sentencing date. This is a dangerous flaw in my opponent's judgment, and that's just one example of many.
I'll stand by the cases. They have focused between him and Elon Musk. They have focused on 2 cases out of thousands that I've handled.
I'll stand by the cases. In 2020, you did sentence a child sex offender to 4 years in prison after prosecutors requested 10. Do you regret that sentence?
Yes. I don't regret that sentence because I followed the law in that case, as I always do. I applied the law, which says that judges have to consider every relevant factor in sentencing. You have to consider both the aggravating and mitigating factors. And the Supreme Court has said you have to order the minimum amount of prison time you believe is necessary to protect the public. That's what I did in that case and every other case. And my goal is always to keep the community safe.
Right. So it always starts with that sort of thing. And then where did she sit on January 6ers? Obviously, this is a state judge talking about state issues. But how did she feel? What is her feelings? What did her friends have to say about that? There should be a little background check where you just start asking some questions. Was she very sympathetic to the massive sentences being handed out? Because she's a Democrat. And of course, they all had to talk about how January 6th was the end of democracy and all the other bullshit they did. So all of that makes it tough. Elon Musk was handing out $1 million checks, which is pretty freaking wild. Is this doxing? Because you put the guy's name out there and said he's now got $1 million? No, just like the phone book wasn't either. Where does that go, though, by the way? Where does the suicidal, empathetic approach go? It goes to a sentencing council that we can look over the pond and see our friends in Great Britain, who at least in the last 150 years, have not been our enemies, but they've slowly been departing from rationality. They've slowly had their country leave. And I will show you this little sentencing thing. It's a 1-to-1 problem with sentencing, where they now have a 2-tiered sentence or a 2-tiered system of justice, where they've basically said, if you're a white guy, you're not an immigrant, you're not a pregnant woman, you're not a blah, blah, blah. If you're not one special person, the only people they left out are the toxically masculine native-born white males, and they're going to get stiffer and more aggressive sentences. This is not what justice looks like. And you, like, to his credit, you're actually hearing the prime minister say that this is a problem. But it's a problem because they've enabled this thing for a very long time. And then we're going to get into what's that problem look like. At least on a cursory way, I can see a big problem, which is that you have non-assimilated people who don't share the same values running your country. Yes, running it. That seems inherently problematic to me, which is why you've seen a backlash and why you've got to imprison people like Donald Trump. It's why you've got to get Marine Le Pen out of the race. It's what they did by canceling an election in Romania. Go to the Sean Ryan podcast if you want to go see that story. It's why they are attacking people in Hungary. You have to go out there and get these people to stop. It's the only way that you can do this. You have to remove them. You have to either discredit them with a media machine. You have to either arrest them or take them off the ballot. You have to put them in prison or make them unelectable. And they continue to do this kind of thing. Here's what's his name? Starmer talking about the two-tier system of justice. How he's a little bit disappointed, isn't he?
Well, I'm disappointed in this response, and the Lord Chancellor is obviously continuing to engage on this, and we're considering our response. And, you know, all options are on the table, but I am disappointed at this outcome, and now we'll have to consider what we do as a result.
Well, let's cross live to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Now, it seems to me, Chopper, that the politicians want the Sentencing Council to change their direction here, but they're not willing to legislate to do so. They're in a bit of a war of words here.
Yes, they are. And hi, Charlie. Hi, Nana. Welcome to Huddersfield, where it's pretty cold up here. I've been talking to the Prime Minister moments ago. I asked him twice, will you just scrap the Sentencing Council? It's a quango. You have the power to scrap it. What you don't do is have the power to overrule it. And frankly, the judges now are looking back at the elected politicians here, both Sir Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood, who is a Justice Secretary, and saying, I'm afraid to say, these are what's going to happen. And from Tuesday, this is what will happen. Judges will prepare pre-sentencing reports where necessary. And if someone is of ethnic, cultural or faith minority, or a young person under 25, or a woman or a pregnant woman, they will get a special sentencing report. Normally those pre-sentencing reports do mean that the sentence is mitigated, that time is taken off for a jail term, for example. What it means, though, is that white men are going to be treated a lot tougher by judges from Tuesday compared to other groups in society. And that is unacceptable to the Prime Minister. He said in terms there, I said twice, would you scrap the Sentencing Council? He said all options are open.
All options are open is a very political way of saying that I have a weak will and I'm not willing to talk about it. How did this end up happening? This is how it ends up happening when your country basically surrenders without even firing a shot.
The mayor of London is Muslim. The mayor of Birmingham is a Muslim. The mayor of Leeds is Muslim. The mayor of Blackburn is Muslim. The mayor of Sheffield is Muslim. The mayor of Oxford is a Muslim. The mayor of Luton is a Muslim. The mayor of Oldham is a Muslim. The mayor of Rochdale is a Muslim. All of this was achieved by only 4 million Muslims out of the 66 million people in England. Today in England, there are over 3,000 mosques. There are over 130 Sharia courts in England, and there are more than 50 Sharia councils. 78% of Muslim women do not work and receive state support and free accommodation. 63% of Muslims do not work and receive state support and free housing. State-supported Muslim families have an average of 6 to 8 children who all receive free accommodation. Every school in the UK is required to teach about Islam. The number one most common baby name in England is Muhammad. This is not immigration. This is invasion.
So, I mean, to her point, though, if the choice was between Muhammad and McLovin, which is the only choice you actually have when you name your baby. I'm making light because you guys haven't seen the movie Superbad. But yeah, is that not troubling for Britain to have that? When I worked in Britain, and I actually did work in Britain, I worked for the Mayor of London's office in Britain in 2001 or 2002, something like that, going back a long time ago. It must have been 2002. I worked for Ken Livingstone. He's like an OG British liberal guy. Eventually, that leads to this suicidal empathy. And here's where the rubber meets the road. Because there's all this saber rattling about how do we fix Ukraine and are we going to go to war with the Muslims and with the Russians with Muslims in our army. This is where it hit me. I'm going to show you people saying whether they will or will not fight. When you have people on the streets that live in your country that do not want to defend that country, your country is screwed. This is pretty wild. I've actually held on to these clips for a while. I didn't know when they were going to come together, but here they have. So enjoy this. This is a couple of young black kids being asked, hey, would you go and fight on behalf of the UK? Would you go and join the army? They're young. They're like, what, 10, 12 years old? Man, if you asked me if I was going to join the army when I was 12, heck yeah. Isn't that what you wanted to do? Play G.I. Joe? Listen to these kids. No interest.
Rishi Sunak tells you that you're going to war. What are you going to tell him?
I would tell him to just like, bro, you feel like, for starters,
Yeah.
you feel I'm going to war.
Yeah.
That you started, like, what?
Yeah.
Come on now, use your brain.
I know. Why are you not going to go to war?
I ain't going to war because it's like, bro,
Yeah.
it's England.
'Cause
Why
it's
am I
like, bro.
fighting for a country I don't like?
Are you not English?
Oh, you don't like?
Nah.
Where are you from then?
Yeah.
You sure sounds
I'm from
English.
Jamaica and Africa, innit? So, mummy needs to ship me to Niger, so I need to be safe. Safe.
Oh, I see. How about
You guys live in the UK?
Yeah, we do.
Would you join the military?
No, we're not from this country.
If they say it's compulsory, what would you do?
I'll just go back to Egypt. Go back to my country. No, I'll just go back to my country.
First of all, I'm not a UK citizen. I'm an immigrant.
I'm
Okay.
Welsh.
No, unfortunately not. I'm
She's
not from
Welsh.
this country originally. You know?
Where are you from?
Brazil.
Do you live here?
Yes.
Would you go to war for this country?
No.
I'm Pakistani, so
Are you a resident?
I'm a resident. I've got dual nationality.
Oh, okay, cool. So there you go. Dual nationality, no belief in their country that they live in that supports them. 63% of Muslims not even working, getting paid on public assistance. That seems problematic, doesn't it? And I guess all of that goes to this one little place that I saw this weekend. And this is what I refer to as a national suicide. This is what suicidal empathy ends in. I don't know any other way to say it. It's crazy. This is a military recruitment video for the British Army. Okay? And what you're seeing are guys in multicams. He's obviously of Middle Eastern descent. Everyone's got their ghillie suits on. They've got the grass and the camouflage and their helmet, and they've all stopped in a beautiful headland full of like marshes and mist. And he's going to pray. Everybody stop the radio transmissions. We can't have any transmissions right now. We got to stop so my man can pray 5 times a day. Is that true? As somebody said, oh, keeping my faith, that's how I joined the British military. Everybody says, okay, good job. Yeah, we let Muhammad do his thing. This is what belonging looks like. Find where you belong. Search army jobs for the British Army. Be the best. You can be a Muslim guy and they will all stop. Everything. The war stops for you. Do they stop an hour for Eucharistic adoration? Do they give you special time to go to Mass? What in the hell is this looking like? Look, I used to get a little bit of time off when I was in the military. You guys know this if you've ever been through basic training. Everybody attends some kind of a worship service when you're in basic because it's the 1 hour where they can't screw with you. They're not allowed to. People will hold your hand and they will pray and you can sing and you can be part of a worship service where you just can be a human being and then you get to go back to being dog shit right after that. And it's great. It's a great little reminder that there's still a world outside of basic training. And for the however many, weeks it is, whether it's 8 weeks or 12 weeks or 24 weeks of training where you're just garbage and everybody looks at you like you're spit and they want to just wipe you off their boot, that's fine. You get that one little moment of humanity. Everybody's had that experience. If you've been in basic, you guys can put it in the comments. You know. Maybe you never went to church again, but I bet you went to church while you were at basic because you could. Some kind of a ceremony. This is crazy. I mean, it's actually suicidal empathetic. Okay. And then I've got this other story. This is where I see us going with that. Well, actually, screw it. Let me just play this. This is New York. This is Leroy from Viral News New York playing this one. This is Times Square in the United States. This year. Can you guys see this? They shut down maybe one of the most iconic places in the United States. When people think of America, they think of the lights of Times Square. They think of New York City. You've got a French flag flying. You've got a POW MIA flag flying, reminding us of all the people. How many wars have we fought against like Muslim countries in the last 20 years? How many of you veterans are GWAT veterans that are listening to this right now? Or maybe you're a Desert Storm vet. You remember? And we now have a call to prayer that shuts down like one of the most iconic things in America. You guys can follow Lura if you want. It's Viral News New York, at Viral News New York. This is nuts. Like, that's where we're heading right now. And how do you head there? You head there by talking about toxic masculinity, by berating the men that built the country, that continue to build the country. This is kind of funny. I've got a little piece here. CBS has got a story that says homeowners spared by California's fires are grappling with returning to home among toxic debris. And you got a picture of a guy. Who is that? Oh, it's a white engineer in the Army Corps of Engineers. He's a lieutenant colonel. Is that right? Or is he a colonel? Let me double check his name here. I don't want to miss categorize him. Colonel. He's a colonel. Eric Swenson. So he's on the screen right there talking about this. And then you start thinking, well, yeah, California had a pretty rough go, didn't it? It had a couple of big fires that came through and burned out a bunch of people's homes. A lot of rich people, a lot of leftist people, Bill Maher types, right? Yeah. Who's building those homes back, do you think? Adam Carolla has a fantastic point. He's always a good advocate for the regular man, for people who are like working in trades, because he came up as a carpenter. Maybe that's why I like Adam Carolla so much. He just seems like a regular guy. He's hysterical as well. But it came from just being a guy working his ass off to be good at his skill that he wanted to do, but also paying the bills by using his hands. Who's building those houses back in California, you think?
They all have to pretend to give a shit about young dudes now because they're losing their demo. They were the enemy. Young white dudes were always the enemy, or heterosexual dudes or whatever, and now they're losing their constituency, so now they have to pretend to give a fuck.
She signed an executive order aimed at increasing young men's enrollment in education and skill training programs. So, yeah, they're doing some catch-up right now.
Yeah. Okay. Perhaps you shouldn't have waged war on them for the last 15 years, you fucking retards. That would have been nice.
We got a clip of Ned Lamont.
Toxic masculinity and all you assholes.
Your Connecticut governor trying to...
By the way, just let me say this. Let me just say this. Please listen to me, everyone. I toured the sites of Altadena and the Palisades and Malibu. There's a whole bunch of people with dicks and balls who are fucking driving excavators and trucks and operating all the heavy equipment. All the fucking people you hate, all the people who didn't go to college, all the guys with the cocks and the balls, all the guys who don't give you their pronouns. That place is being completely rebuilt by just them.
Yeah.
Nobody who looks like you. Nobody uses pronouns. No he, she's. None of your fucking freak shows. None of your Admiral Levines. Nobody looks like that. It's just a bunch of fucking dudes who go by he and him, bitch. So let's not run them out of society. The reason we shouldn't run those guys out of society is because every once in a while, shit's going to burn. And then you need dudes to rebuild it.
Mic drop moment, would you say? It's so simple. Like, you just can't run out the men who built your society, who do the jobs that keep society functioning. Go out there and look who's running on a garbage truck. You ever done that? You ever wait for the garbage guys? Why do we say garbage men? How many garbage women have you ever seen? You want to see society come to its knees? Stop picking up garbage from people's houses. It will end. In the same way that if you have a massive problem, like burning your entire city to the ground, the people who are going to run the diggers and the excavators and the earth movers and the backhoes and all of the heavy equipment, they're all dudes. I drive by dudes, and some of them have brown skin and some of them have white skin and some of them are Asian guys. I don't give a shit what they look like. I'm just saying, this is such honest, obvious statements. It's dudes with a pair of balls between their legs that scratch them and stand around sometimes and wear jeans and have rough hands with cuts on them and dirt under their fingernails that make the world work, and always have. And if you get rid of them, all of your niceties, you don't get the internet turned on, and you don't get to be able to have a farmhouse open concept house or anything else, because all of that pretty living, it gets enabled by dudes who probably don't live that way. Just saying. I've always had a blue collar attitude. I've spent a lot of time with a shovel in my hands. It's just simple. It's one of the best gifts my father gave me, in addition to learning how to ride a bicycle. He taught me how to dig a hole. Sometimes I dug a hole over and over and over again. You would come out and measure the damn thing. If you guys think I'm wrong, my dad is oftentimes sitting in our live chat. It's at Seraphin. Yeah, for serious. Ask Charlie. He used to go out and measure my holes. He'd say, make this 20 inches. I'd go and dig the thing so that it was 20 inches. If it was too wide, I'd have to fill it in and dig it again. If I didn't get the sides just, perfectly vertical because we were planting things on hills, it was over. I had to go dig the damn hole again. I've dug a lot of holes, and I don't mind. And my dad's legacy, in my mind, my brothers and I all laughed about this. When we thought about my dad, who worked as an advertising guy, who worked in radio, an indoor job, if you asked me what my dad was doing when I was a kid, he was sweaty, shirtless, a little bit overweight, and carrying a freaking shovel with dirt on his hands, dirt on his, on his shoulders because he'd been flinging dirt around, or he was running a chainsaw in like sweatpants. This is the legacy of what men look like historically. And then you have whatever's going on today. This is the opposite of what men look like. This is Gavin Newsom being asked a question. He's obviously running for president, and he still won't say it because even when told, hey, cut the bullshit, just say if you're running or not, he can't do it. It's the opposite of what America means. So as we continue to remember that this guy's pretty dangerous, remember, soft hands, soft face, slimy and greasy, never dug a hole in his life, not someone who's going to look out for the American workers that are out there literally rebuilding pieces of California because of his malfeasance. This is something we can't forget. And then, of course, I guarantee you, Gavin Newsom will be all on board for a two-tiered system of justice that protects Muslim guys over the guys that are actually rebuilding Southern California right now.
Given that we are in this dire situation, I feel like we don't have time anymore for the old bullshit. The old, are you running for president? Well, there's an exploratory committee and I'm looking at it. I'm happy with my job as governor. I mean, your future is not in California. Your future is in Iowa. Let's dispense with the bullshit. We need someone who's going to be the champion. Are you going to do it or not? Just come on. Tell us. We don't have time for the bullshit.
No, by the way, I deeply respect that. I can't stand the bullshit as well. And I mean that. So look, but this is not my purpose or passion. It's not my meaning. It's not everything. The cynicism that's out there, that every move he's making is some move to some longer term strategy or short term strategy.
No, just that you're a guy who could do it, who could get it done, who could win.
I deeply respect that. I respect the question, but I don't have any grand plans as it respects to that. I'm trying to do best I can. I'm also trying to be accountable. By the way, you want things to change, you got to change. And that's what the podcast is about. That's my recognition of where we're weak.
Can I do
you got to call balls and strikes.
All right. And that's how you end up with this. Actually, credit to Idaho. I misunderstood. This is why you don't just read headlines. You have to actually read the story. Christopher Talbot, 7 years old, made an obscene gesture at a 49-year-old victim, struck him with his car. Okay. The victim apparently had been driving a truck with pro-Trump flags on it. God forbid, like some kind of domestic terrorist, the thing that the leftist thinks that they can justify violence against. He had just parked his car. He exited his vehicle when a 70-year-old man struck him with his car, rammed him, and the victim drove himself to a local hospital where he was treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Police didn't identify the victim. They said he was a counter-protester. Finally, we were getting a little bit of play. That's only because it's Idaho. NBC kind of buries the story in here. This is happening in Meridian, Idaho, if you guys are curious. And so maybe the world is spinning back towards the axis that it needs to. But in the meantime, I read stories like this, and this is where I'm going to wrap up. This blew my mind. I read this over the weekend. Relationship experts reveal why women are staying single and avoiding marriage. It represents a profound shift. It is written by Brooke Cato, published on the 29th of March. Even if they like it, they won't put a ring on it. This is her opening statement. There's a reason why so many ladies are single, and apparently it's men's fault. There's been a simple but profound shift in the dating space. Women are realizing that protecting their peace is their number one priority. This is the dumbest thing that I've ever heard. I'm going to continue on. She quotes someone called Danielle Sitella. They're afraid of losing themselves in a relationship and having to shrink, settle, or self-abandon, noting that women are now, quote, choosing peace over chaos, purpose over pressure, and emotional safety over surface-level connections. Instead of settling for a relationship that isn't going to serve them, women would much rather wait and die alone, apparently. The woman who wrote this is a brilliant young woman. She is 26 years old, so she's obviously figured this all out, and she also is looking forward to dying alone, apparently. That's not to go after anybody here that doesn't have a partner in life or that is not living with a spouse that loves them, but my point to you is that this is ridiculous. This is how you go and do the subterfuge that breaks down Western society. I saw another post from a woman who probably agrees with almost everything I have to say that said that the Republicans and conservatives in general have made an idolatry. They've idolized family. I shit you not, she said that, and marriage as an institution. This is the inevitable consequence of allowing your values to slip. It's the inevitable consequences of moving forward in the propaganda game from we just want to have gay marriage, people should be able to love who they love, to the point where you have to recognize it, to the point where marriage means nothing, to the point where marriage is now the enemy, and you have made an idol out of the thing that God basically established going back to the Garden of Eden, if you guys believe in creation myths and how it works. It turns out it worked really well, and the most successful societies in the history of the world are all based on the one thing, aren't they? There's a reason why nobody is commuting and trying to move into Muslim majority countries. They're all coming to try to take over Western countries. Why? Because living's better. Because we can actually afford to support 63% of the non-working Muslims in Britain or in the United States. People come here because they want to be part of this. And they don't look for the underlying reasons why this is successful. It's successful because it is Western in tradition, which is to say a Greek and Roman sort of political system, and a Christian ethos and ideology and underpinning moralism. That's it. It's not complicated. It's really not that hard, and I don't understand why people don't get it. If you want to go and blow a leftist's mind, all you got to go do is ask them, hey, where did you get your values from? Why do you think the poor are noble? Because there's one point in history when people who had lived in poverty were not looked at as being cursed by the gods. And it is a specifically Christian tinge that happened at a very specific time in global history for all of humanity. Nobody ever looked at the poor as being of value. That is a Christian thing. And so all of the Marxism and the leftism and all the things that these people believe, the communists, they cannot exist without Christian underpinnings. They just think that they can throw out the foundation and still be able to carry on where they're at, which is absurd. It is truly crazy. They are in the post-religious mindset, but they still cling to religious principles. They just forgot why. The why part. Anyhow, I'm going to give you a little bit of a fun thing. It was an anecdote. If you guys want to have an opportunity to enjoy a funny conversation, have a little bit lighthearted, if you have a long drive coming up, by all means, download our Sunday sit-downs. I do these for you. They take a lot of my time. They take more time than any of the other podcasts, but they're a lot of fun. I get to meet really cool people. This weekend, I sat down with Cameron Smith. He made a game that is meant to counter the narrative with humor. It is meant to go, which is one of the things we love. It is meant to do a psyop on the psyopers, if you will. You guys should check this one out. Put it on your hopper. It's KyleSeraphin.com, or I'm sorry, KyleSeraphinShow.com if you want to go to the Spotify version of it. Otherwise, you can obviously watch it here on Rumble and so on. Check it out. Enjoy it. And here's a little taste of it. One of his buddies decided to play as David Duke and as a racist version of David Duke to the point where he was attacking and messing up his own stuff. We're going to play the teaser, and then I've got a palate cleanse for you, and we'll get out of here for today. We'll get this week started.
You could play as David Duke as a champion because we thought that would be hilarious. And we had a guy who got in character, and he was playing as a racist, so he would only attack the African American cards. And I was like, I never even thought of that. I never even thought of getting. I was like, what? Like, well, we're on the same team. He's like, yeah, but I'm racist. Yes. I was like, we have another card who's far right. They're trailer trash. And when you destroy the card and put them in jail because they're cooking meth, their trailer blows up and it damages everybody around. So there's we hit everybody. People who disagree with me, disagree with my perspective. We tried to make a game so that we want those people to play too, because we want people to be able to disassociate with their emotions. And the thing about comedy is the reason why things are funny is because they're true. Okay. So you can kind of sneak in there and expose them to some truth. They wouldn't typically emotionally allow themselves to do it, but they can't help but laugh.
You could take a communist and have them play Monopoly and them still get a kick out of getting all the money and putting all the hotels and watching you go bankrupt, right? I mean,
the idea is to take, your people who don't think like you and expose them to ideas in a different way that they've never thought of.
That's it, guys. Check that out. It's on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. It will always be the featured item for the week that it's up. And Cameron Smith, I guarantee you, most of you have never heard of this guy. That's fine. That's what we want to do. We want to talk about people who are interesting, that are in the weeds, just like us. That's where I came from. That's who I am. I'm just a regular guy, just like Cameron is. We had a great conversation. I could tell he was a little bit, concerned about being on camera. And then we started talking. It's like, yeah, it would just be like two guys having a beer and you guys are getting to listen in on it, talking about stuff that we do and what's funny and what we find amusing. So I think you'll enjoy this. Last little piece, I will always leave you with a good palate cleanse. This one is a universally common experience for those of you who have children. If you have children, you have lived this truth. They will say the things that you say, and it's your fault when your kids start swearing and they're toddlers. But something about kids swearing makes me really laugh. So enjoy this. Tune it down if you're at work.
Fucking damn it. Oh, fucking damn it.
Hey, Mara, how's that apple juice?
Good.
Yeah? It's good?
Fucking good. A fucking goat outside.
It's just a goat.
No. It's a fucking goat.
Oh shit.
Oh shit.
What were you saying to me?
Fuck off.
Excuse me?
Fuck off.
Excuse me?
You can't get mad at your toddlers when they're swearing because they learned it from you. They are little human sponges. I've got one right now that's about to start talking. I am terrified to find out what she first repeats. But my wife and I, the biggest thing is you can't laugh at them because that encourages them. They know it's funny when you laugh. And then they learn the wrong lessons and they run around telling you it's a fucking goat. It's a fucking goat. By the way, I love that there's a British kid doing the exact same thing. All right. That's it for today. I hope you guys learned something new. I hope that you have a fantastic start to your week. Look forward to seeing you throughout this week. I have no idea where we're going to go with it, but it's going to be fun. God bless you. Talk to you again tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.